Play just the first few bars of Mr. Blue Sky with the sound of a fire extinguisher marking the downbeats, or play a few bars of any other part of the song, and the vast majority of people will immediately identify it. Mr. Blue Sky is inarguably one of the most instantly recognizable songs of all time. It is also the most upbeat song ever released. While this normally would be a subjective judgment, amazingly, a cognitive neuroscientist has delivered a scientific foundation for Mr. Blue Sky being the world's #1 feel-good song. A survey not long afterwards proved the point, when Mr. Blue Sky was voted the happiest song of all time. The sunny nature of the song is the most likely reason why Mr. Blue Sky has become such an intrinsic part of popular culture. It also makes it rather odd that the song was not immediately recognized as a masterpiece when it first was released 45 years ago in 1977. Instead, for the first 25 years after its first release, Mr. Blue Sky was seen as simply one of the many hits written by Jeff Lynne and performed by the Electric Light Orchestra. It was not the band's highest charting song, nor seen as necessarily its most important song. Exactly when Mr. Blue Sky became a dramatic shift from slightly obscure 70s hit to culturally significant all-time classic is not entirely clear. But its use in a 2002 Volkswagen commercial is often regarded as a turning point. Since then, the song has been featured in movies like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind in 2004, The Magic Roundabout in 2005, The Game Plan in 2007, Martian Child in 2007, The Invention of Lying 2009, Paul Blart, Mall Cop 2009, Megamind 2010, and Guardians of the Galaxy 2 in 2017. The use of Mr. Blue Sky in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, with a tiny character called Baby Groot dancing to the song, while oblivious to the violence around him, has become the stuff of legend. The song has also been used in TV series like The Office and, of course, The Great Doctor Who. In addition, Mr. Blue Sky was played during the awards ceremony of the 2011 Football League final, the opening and closing ceremonies of the 2012 Summer Olympics, the closing ceremony of the 2018 Commonwealth Games, and used for promotion of the 2022 Commonwealth Games. Naturally, Mr. Blue Sky has been covered by many acts, including 2021 by the Muppets house band, Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. The first attempt at creating a scientific foundation for the euphoric reaction people have to certain songs, and to Mr. Blue Sky in particular, was made in 2015 by Dr. Jacob Jolle, a Dutch cognitive neuroscientist. On the invitation of British electronic brand Alba, he developed something called the Feel Good Formula, incorporating lyrics, tempo, and musical key. The scientist studied 126 songs, made over a period of 50 years, used the formula to assign points to each song, and he then measured people's brainwaves while the songs were played for them. Queen's Don't Stop Me Now initially ended at the top. But after the scientist refined his formula in 2019, Mr. Blue Sky was the new oral pleasure #1. A survey was conducted a year later by Greatest Hits Radio of 1,300 people. 1/5 voted for Mr. Blue Sky, the happiest song ever, thereby easily putting it in first place. It again beat Queen's Don't Stop Me Now into second place, followed by classic positive songs by the Bee Gees, ABBA, Bon Jovi, and many more. All this means that liking Mr. Blue Sky is no longer a guilty secret. And even the Electric Light Orchestra itself has been rehabilitated, from decades of being regarded as the epitome of uncool to becoming one of the most beloved acts on the planet. In this video, we look at the history of the Electric Light Orchestra and Jeff Lynne, how they made Mr. Blue Sky, and we analyze what makes this song great and why it makes people feel so good. The origins of the Electric Light Orchestra go back to the late 60s in Birmingham, England. Singer and guitarist Roy Wood was the leader of a band called The Move, which enjoyed many hits in the UK, but never broke through in the US. Meanwhile, Jeff Lynne played in a band called The Idle Race, but left to join the more successful The Move in 1969. Inspired by the way the Beatles incorporated orchestral elements into their music, Wood wanted to start a separate band in which the orchestral instruments were the most important element. The idea resonated with Lynne, so the two started the Electric Light Orchestra, which ran for 2 years in parallel with The Move. Lynne and Wood recruited drummer Bev Bevan, horn player Bill Hunt, and violinist Steve Woolham for the first lineup of the band, which recorded a self-titled album at Philips Studios in London. The album was released in 1971, and the lead single, 10538 Overture, was a top 10 hit in the UK, and it pushed the album to number 32. The music on the album today is categorized as progressive rock, but at the time it was regarded as baroque and roll, or orchestral rock. However, the Electric Light Orchestra soon found itself at the heart of a musical movement called symphonic rock, which was very popular in the UK and a precursor to prog rock. The Beatles were one of the inspirations of the genre, and British groups that incorporated elements of classical music in their music in the late 60s and early 70s included Procol Harum, the Moody Blues, The Nice, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Deep Purple, Genesis, Jethro Tull, and even Jimmy Page was live playing Johann Sebastian Bach's Bourrée and attacking his guitar with a violin bow. Symphonic rock acts incorporated themes and arrangements from classical music while maintaining fairly traditional rock and roll lineups. Like the Beatles, they would occasionally invite classical musicians or orchestras to play on their records or to accompany them live. ELO took this idea one step further by incorporating classical musicians in its regular lineup. In 1972, the band took to the stage with 2 cellists and a violinist, which became their most common lineup and part of their trademark sound. Despite the strong symphonic elements in the band's music, Lynne has stressed that they were not part of the emerging prog rock genre. My intention behind the sound of ELO was to get away from what the other groups seemed to be doing around that time. Around 71 and 72, all the big, long guitar solos were the rage, 10-minute guitar solos. I wanted to do stuff that had more of a tune. I wanted tunes because I love tunes. In 1972, with a different lineup, which included 2 cellists and a violinist, the Electric Light Orchestra spent several months recording its second album at Air Studios in London. Wood left halfway, leaving Lynne as a de facto band leader. The album, called ELO2, was released in March of 1973. It contained long tracks and was also only moderately successful, but yielded a single, a cover of Chuck Berry's Roll Over Beethoven. That again was a top 10 in the UK and a minor hit in the US. The songs were shorter and the songwriting was sharper on ELO's third studio album, On the Third Day, recorded at Delaney Studios and Air Studios in London. It was released at the end of 1973, and its lead single, Showdown, was a favourite of John Lennon and continued the band's upward momentum. The Electric Light Orchestra enjoyed its American breakthrough with its 4th album, recorded again at Delaney Studios and released in 1974. El Dorado marked the first time Lynne fully realised his vision of orchestral Beatles-influenced rock. The song Can't Get You Out of My Head became a top 10 hit in the US, and as a result, El Dorado became the band's first US gold record. Strangely, it did little in the UK. ELO's 5th album, Face the Music, in 1975, was recorded at Giorgio Moroder's Musicland studio in Munich, with Reinhold Mack engineering, and included Evil Woman, which became a big hit in the UK and the US, as well as Strange Magic, which reached number 14 in the US. Just like its predecessor, the album did little in the UK, but went gold in the US. ELO had by now also built a reputation as an impressive live act, making use of the latest advances in PA amplification and piezo pickups, so the cellos and violin could be heard. The band was called the world's first touring rock and roll chamber group. ELO's big international breakthrough came with their sixth album, A New World Record, which is widely regarded as a masterpiece and the band's magnum opus. Again, recorded at Musicland by Reinhold Mack and released in 1976. It reached the top 10 in many countries, including the UK and the US, where it went platinum in both countries. Hit singles from the album included Living Thing, Rockaria, Do Ya, and Telephone Line. With ELO enjoying great success, plan was to make the follow-up a double album, which at the time was almost obligatory for any band or artist wanting real credibility. With Jeff Lynne being the band's only songwriter, it put a lot of pressure on him, so he decided to retreat to the Swiss Alps to write the songs. In the spring of 1977, a chalet was booked for 4 weeks in a small town called Bassins, just north of Lake Geneva. A stack of gear was hired in a music shop in Geneva itself, including a Revox tape recorder, and transported up the mountain. Lynne seemed all set for a productive month, but instead he suffered writer's block, in part induced by consistent bad weather. A local pub provided ample and very pleasant distraction, but also was not exactly conducive to writing songs. However, legend does go that one day Lynne woke up to a clear blue sky, and hey, presto, Mr. Blue Sky was born. The slightly nonsensical lyrics explain this. Although the story is mostly true, there are a few nuances, and it's not clear whether Mr. Blue Sky was in fact the first song written. It was dark and misty for 2 weeks, and I didn't come up with a thing, remembered Lynne. Suddenly the sun shone, and it was, wow, look at those beautiful Alps. I wrote Mr. Blue Sky and 13 other songs in the next 2 weeks. Lynne's writing struggles are hinted at by the rather uninviting original working title for Mr. Blue Sky, which was Thou Shalt Not No. 7. And even with his writer's block lifted, Lynne only wrote the verses for Mr. Blue Sky in the Swiss chalet. The rest of the song was written during the actual recording sessions for the album at Musicland Studios in Munich in Germany. Drummer Bev Bevan recalled, Jeff had every song for the album on tape. As usual, he had done it with a piano, guitar, and by humming the tune. We always built up an album in the same way. Drums and bass first, then piano, followed by rhythm guitar. Electronic keyboards would come next, finishing with guitar solos. Only after the instrumental tracks were recorded would Lynne write and sing the lyrics. Out of the Blue sessions took place from May to August and were again engineered by German engineer Reinhold Mack, with Lynne producing, as was customary with ELO since the band's second album. For ELO's previous 2 albums, the orchestral strings had been overdubbed at Delaney Studios in London. However, for the Out of the Blue sessions, Mack convinced Lynne that it'd be easier and cheaper to record the strings in another studio in Munich. But the orchestral sessions proved a disaster. Mack could not get the tight sound he was after and invited the orchestra musicians over to Musicland, where he did not have a large live room, so the string players were squeezed against the walls, while the 32-piece choir had to sing in the lobby. The lineup of the Electric Light Orchestra itself consisted of cellist Melvin Gale and Hugh McDowell, violinist Mick Karmarski, bassist Kelly Grucut, keyboardist Richard Tandy, and drummer Bev Bevan, and of course Lynne. The songwriter is credited on the album as playing Gibson EDS 1275, a Gibson Les Paul Custom, a Gibson Marauder, an Ovation 1615/4 and 1619/4, a Wurlitzer electric piano, and a Mini Moog. Tandy is credited with playing a Yamaha C7B piano, a Yamaha CS80, a Wurlitzer, an ARP 2600, Odyssey, an Omni, a Mini Moog, a Poly Moog, a Hohner clavinet, and an SLM Concert Spectrum, a Mellotron M400, sequencers, as well as a Gibson SG custom guitar. Lynn, Tandy, and Lewis Clark wrote the orchestral and choral arrangements, with the orchestra conducted by Clark. Out of the Blue also pioneered the use of the vocoder. Lynn later said that he was inspired by the vocal sound in Sparky's Magic Piano, a 1950s children's series of audio stories, which was created using a Sonovox, an early version of the Talkbox. During the recordings for Out of the Blue, Lynn learned that a prototype of the vocoder 2000 synths had just been built in Stuttgart, a 3-hour drive away, so they brought it to Munich. It took 2 days to learn how to use the vocoder, and it ended up being used on the song Sweet Talking Woman, and most famously on Mr. Blue Sky, on which it was performed by keyboardist Richard Tandy. In addition, Bevan played the famous fire extinguisher on the song, providing its now iconic sound, which is a dominant part of the song's driving 4-to-the-floor rhythm. Out of the Blue was released in October of 1977, as was the album's lead single and opener, Turn to Stone. The 17-track double album continued the upwards momentum of previous albums, going to number 4 and platinum in both the UK and US, and being extremely successful in many other countries. Mr. Blue Sky was released as a single in January of 1978, reaching to number 6 in the UK and number 35 in the US. Because of ELO's uncool status, reviews of the album range from lukewarm to negative. Put-downs like perfectly hollow and bland rock music were not uncommon. Undeterred by the strong criticisms of Out of the Blue, the Electric Light Orchestra continued its upwards curve with its next album, Discovery, in 1979, which turned out to be its most commercially successful. It contains the band's biggest hit, Don't Bring Me Down. You got me running, going out of my mind. You got me... Lynn and ELO also provided one half of the soundtrack for the movie Xanadu, which was released in 1980. The album went to number 1 in many countries, and the title song with Olivia Newton-John as a guest performer became a massive worldwide hit. Another ELO album followed, Time, in 1981, which was another UK number 1. But by the mid-80s, the momentum was lost and the band members started to leave. Drummer Bev Bevan went to play for Black Sabbath, for example. After 2 more moderately successful albums, Secret Messages in 1983 and Balance of Power in 1986, ELO disbanded completely. Jeff Lynne went on to work as a producer, in 1987 producing George Harrison's Cloud 9, and the 2 musicians then formed the Traveling Wilburys, a supergroup that also included Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, and Roy Orbison, and that recorded 2 albums. Following this, Lynne produced solo albums by Orbison and Tom Petty. Lynne also released his first solo album, Armchair Theatre, in 1990. Quite possibly, Lynne's wildest dream came true in 1994, when he famously became the only producer to work in the room with the Beatles other than George Martin. Invited by Harrison, Lynne produced and played on 2 new songs by the Beatles, which were based on demos recorded by John Lennon, Free as a Bird and Real Love. Following this, Lynne contributed as a producer, musician and/or songwriter to solo albums by Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney, as well as Roger McGuinn, Joe Cocker, Aerosmith, Tom Jones, Bonnie Tyler, Joe Walsh, and others. Lynne revived the Electric Light Orchestra name at the turn of the century for an album called Zoom in 2001, on which he played all instruments apart from guest performances by Richard Tandy, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, and a few others. After a cancelled tour, the project was aborted. Lynne continued his one-man band adventures by re-recording a collection of Electric Light Orchestra classics almost entirely by himself. The title of the resulting album, Mr. Blue Sky, the very best of the Electric Light Orchestra, in 2012, acknowledged the enormous popularity of the song in the 21st century. Presumably spurred on by the continued rehabilitation of ELO, Lynne released 2 more albums under the banner Jeff Lynne's ELO, Alone in the Universe in 2015 and From Out of Nowhere in 2019. The latter went to number 1 in the UK. As part of this rehabilitation, Jeff Lynne's ELO performed at the Grammy Awards in 2015 with Ed Sheeran, and the band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2017. Artists like the Flaming Lips and Super Furry Animals acknowledge them as influences, and some people draw a direct line from ELO to Daft Punk. The changed perception of ELO in this century is in part most likely simply a sign of the times, as many critically derided acts from the 70s and 80s are now highly regarded. But it is also clearly, to some degree, due to the astonishing rebirth of Mr. Blue Sky, from half-forgotten 70s hit to one of the most popular classics of all time, and one of the most streamed and downloaded songs of the 70s. Earlier, we mentioned some of the events that may have led to the song's rebirth, for example, its use in a 2002 Volkswagen ad. But the question remains, what is it about the song itself that is so compelling and induces such euphoric feelings that it was voted the happiest song of all time? The Dutch cognitive neuroscientist, Dr. Joly, explained his analysis of feel-good music as follows. I look at tempo, lyric, and key. I apply a formula to music that can predict the effect of the song will have on your mood. Music is intimately linked with memory and emotion, and these associations strongly determine whether a song will put you in a good mood or not. Holiday-themed lyrics naturally remind us of happy times, while a major third musical key sounds happy to our ears, and sometimes we associate with confidence. A high tempo of 150 beats per minute also subconsciously triggers a sense of energy. Combine these three ingredients together, and you have a formula for a perfect feel-good song. With regards to the lyrics, the obvious attraction of Mr. Blue Sky was once identified by Lynn himself, who said, "The lyrics to Mr. Blue Sky are simple and easy to visualize. When the song is playing, you can picture everything that's going on, and everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's the thought of, oh, isn't it nice when the sun comes out? And you know, it really is. The sky is blue. Wow, what a thing. It's a simple kid's story." Look at the tempo at 180 BPM. The tempo of Mr. Blue Sky is faster than the ideal of 150. But it's easy to see that both the tempo and the four-to-the-floor rhythm of Mr. Blue Sky are invigorating, energizing, and happy hormone-inducing, as is the sound of the struck fire extinguisher. The sound introduces several parts of the songs, and in general works like a rallying call. However, while Mr. Blue Sky does indeed start in F major, the chorus in particular has a distinct minor feel. In addition, there are many other factors that contribute to the euphoria-inducing effect of the song. Dr. Joly readily admitted this when he was asked for clarification. He added that while his research has some validity and his formula does a decent job of predicting how people will react to a song, it also needs to be taken with a few grains of salt. So rather than try to fit Mr. Blue Sky to a formula, it is the way the song transcends formulas that makes it so captivating. In particular, there are a number of dramatic juxtapositions. First of all, between the simple, optimistic, childlike lyrics and the minor feel of most of the harmony. There is also the fact that the song is repetitive and in some respects very simple, but at the same time it is extremely complex and unpredictable in its structure and its production, and in the constant variations of the melodies. All this keeps the brain interested. Above all, the full-on, soaring, ever-changing melodies appeal straight to the heart and are reinforced by the staccato four-on-the-floor rhythm. Another appealing aspect of Mr. Blue Sky is the inherent references to other classic songs. Parallels have been drawn with the Beatles' songs Martha My Dear, A Day in the Life, and Hello Goodbye. And Mr. Blue Sky's opening chord sequence of F, E minor 7th, A, D minor is the same as that of Yesterday. The harmony of the song sometimes uses a B instead of a B flat, with chords like G and E minor leading one harmonic analysis to suggest that the song is in D harmonic Dorian, which is a minor mode. The analysis adds that the chords are very unexpected, and the harmonic structure balances great apparent unpredictability at low level with novelty, great simplicity, and thematic unity at a higher level. A very desirable quality in music. In simple language, The combination of the sunny nature of the lyrics and the minor feel of most of the harmonies and melodies creates a depth and a tension that moves the song above many one-dimensional, optimistic songs that quickly start to grate. Monty Python's Always Look on the Bright Side of Life is a wonderful parody of such cheap and cheerful songs.
There's something you forgot, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing.
The repetition element of Mr. Blue Sky is not only apparent in the 4-on-the-floor beat that anchors the song, but also in the fact that the original 1977 version has an amazing 4 verses and 7 choruses. However, new melodic elements and variations are introduced with almost each new verse and chorus, with melody lines that tend to be higher than preceding ones, heightening tension and creating a soaring effect. This is particularly the case in the chorus variation at 156, which is repeated immediately afterwards, but with variations on the backing track. The chorus melody itself is also a marvel of inventiveness, with various vocal melodies coming in and out in call and response patterns, making it difficult to establish one main melody. Yet, instead of being confusing, it dazzles and hooks the listener. The guitar solo is introduced surprisingly early at 1 minute 11, after the first block of 2 choruses, and throughout the song the arrangement becomes more and more complex, with strings and choirs gradually introduced. At 2 minutes 19, this build-up is interrupted, and listeners can take a breath while listening to Tandy singing the song's title on a vocoder. The relative lull sets up a final verse and 2 choruses, with yet more variations. At 3 minutes 13, there's an introduction of yet another completely different melody, with classical overtones sung wordlessly by a choir and repeated once. A BBC review from 2015 described it memorably as the Swingle Singers, RKO Tarzan movie, Rachmaninoff symphonic finale. Kitsch, yet truly exhilarating. At 3 minutes 32, the rhythm slows down, and the last 1.5 minutes of the original version of Mr. Blue Sky is taken up by a completely unrelated piece of music. It's part of the Concerto for a Rainy Day, a 4-track suite that takes up the whole of side 3 of the original vinyl version of Out of the Blue. Mr. Blue Sky is the last song of the suite and culminates in Tandy singing Please Turn Me Over through the vocoder 2000 to encourage listeners to, well, turn over the vinyl record to continue listening. Jeff Lynne's aforementioned 2012 remake of the song leaves out the 5th chorus and the entire Concerto for a Rainy Day end section, which cuts the length of the song from 5 minutes and 3 seconds to 3 minutes and 42. Lynne's remake sounds substantially better than the 77 version, with its deeper bass and clearer high end, while his voice is deeper. In an interview, he explained, "I remember listening to Mr. Blue Sky on the radio, and I thought, this doesn't sound like I thought it did when I made it. I thought this many times about old ELO records. But this time around, I thought, you know what? I could have a go at this and re-record some of the ELO tracks." However, there's also suggestions that the process started in 2002 when Lynne was asked to revisit the song for an aforementioned Volkswagen ad. The new demo was apparently further developed for a 2007 Sears advertisement and in 2008 Guinness beer advertisement, and a promotional campaign for JetBlue called Happy Jetting. Lynne eventually finished the remake using all the production skills he had accumulated over the years, and playing and singing everything himself, apart from Rosie Vela on backing vocals, Mark Mann on strings, and engineer Steve Ray playing shakers and tambourine. Lynne recalled, "I played it for a few people. I said, I think it's much better than the original version. What do you think?" And they all agreed and felt it was much better. It was the cue for Lynne to re-record all the classic ELO tracks that were released on Mr. Blue Sky, the very best of the Electric Light Orchestra 2012. Another 10 years later, the reputation and popularity of Mr. Blue Sky continues to grow. One reviewer called it a miniature pop symphony. And in this respect, there are similarities with Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. It undoubtedly is the combination of the amazingly strong melodies, excellent arrangements, a great production, and the general complexity of the record that means that listeners want to hear Mr. Blue Sky again, 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 and well, again. Those of you that have ever watched any Produce Like a Pro videos will know I am a massive Queen fan. I've probably mentioned it about 10,000 times. Bohemian Rhapsody is the song, and the album, A Night at the Opera, was the album that formulated my love of non-classical music. I grew up listening to classical music with some jazz thrown in there, and I got to hear Queen. And from that, I went in several different directions. The next two albums I remember falling massively in love with were this one, Out of the Blue, for very similar reasons. It had that orchestral, symphonic approach that spoke to me. And to this day, Mr. Blue Sky is one of my top 10 favorite songs ever. I have played that, not in every recording session I've ever done, but in a lot of recording sessions. When we want inspiration, it's just a song to bring out that don't, silence, and let's go. It's just like, it just hits you straight away. It's so upbeat, but never cheesy, never ever cheesy. And the weird thing is, doing research on this and realizing that inexplicably there was a lull in ELO's success. Really? See, for me, and probably any of you that are fans, I never actually really realized that. As far as I am concerned, Out of the Blue came out. It was an incredible album. It was huge, had tons of great singles off of it. Everybody I knew loved that album. Even if they were into punk or new wave or whatever, everybody loved that album. Just like everybody loved Pink Floyd The Wall. You could be a punk rock Adam and the Ant fan and you bought The Wall. You could be punk and post-punk and you bought Out of the Blue, or at least your older brother had it and you sneakily listened to it. Great music is great music. And probably as Gen Xers like myself get into positions where they're music supervisors or producers or whatever, and they get to choose music, they can cherry pick the best of the best. And of course, it doesn't get much better than ELO. And if you just want to cherry pick one song, it doesn't get much better than Mr. Blue Sky. It is an absolute masterpiece. And it shows off all of the aspects of Jeff Lynne's genius, his production skills, his songwriting skills, his arranging skills, his performance. Obviously, there was plenty of other people involved in it as well. But there is one consistent thing with ELO, and it's Jeff Lynne. I mean, as a producer, he's phenomenal, not just with his own stuff or with ELO, but with all of the other incredible artists he worked with. So once again, I was kind of shocked to realize there was any point when ELO weren't considered one of the biggest bands in the world. But that's what you do. You love something, you go back and research it and go, huh? There was a lull? It's hard to believe there was a lull. We all know, and I'm sure many of you will agree, that Jeff Lynne, ELO, and of course this incredible song, Mr. Blue Sky, and the album are just some of the most important things to happen to music. And my hat's off to you, Mr. Lynne. My hat's off to everybody involved in Electric Light Orchestra. Doesn't get much better. Thanks everybody for watching. If you've got any other ideas of artists that you want us to talk about, songs, albums, please put them down below. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, tschüss, tutsins, dos vidania, ciao, adios, adio, goodbye.